Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into a really fascinating but often overlooked part of history, the incredible contributions of the Moors to medicine. We
Yeah.
always hear about like the ancient Greeks and Romans and their advancements, but the Moors, well, they played a pivotal role too. In fact, a lot of the medical practices that we totally take for granted today actually have roots in Moorish innovations.
It's true. We tend to think of medieval Europe as this time of limited scientific understanding, but the arrival of the Moors in Spain back in 711 CE, it really brought a wave of knowledge that completely revolutionized medicine in Europe.
Okay, so before we get into all that, paint me a picture. What was European medicine like before the Moors came along?
Well, imagine medical practices that were, heavily influenced by superstition, where
Mhm.
treatments were often ineffective, and hygiene. Well, the concept of hygiene was almost non-existent.
Ooh, yeah, no, thank you. Not a time I'd want to be sick. So, how did the Moors change all that?
Well, they brought with them centuries of accumulated knowledge from Greek, Roman, Persian, Indian traditions. They had sophisticated medical texts and a really strong emphasis on observation and experimentation,
Right.
things that were largely missing in Europe at the time.
So they were really pushing boundaries. They weren't just holding on to old ideas.
Absolutely. And one of the most striking examples of this is their hospitals called Bimaristans. These weren't just places for the sick to rest. They were organized with specialized wards for different diseases, trained physicians, and they had this focus on providing care for everyone regardless of their social status.
Wow, specialized wards. That's incredible. I mean, that's way ahead of what they had going on in Europe with those basic infirmaries. So it sounds like they were laying the groundwork for the modern hospitals we have today.
Exactly. And that's just the beginning. They also established renowned medical schools in cities like Cordoba, Seville, and Granada. And these schools offered structured education, hands-on training for physicians, something that would later, inspire the standardization of medical education in Europe.
So they weren't just healers, they were incredible teachers as well. Talk about a lasting impact.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's get into the specifics. What kind of groundbreaking advancements came out of these Moorish schools? What were they really known for?
Well, let's talk about surgery.
Okay.
Are you ready for some seriously impressive stuff? Have you ever heard of Abu al-Qasim al-Zahrawi, also known as Abul Qasis?
The name rings a bell, but refresh my memory. Why is he so important?
He's considered by many to be the father of modern surgery.
Wow.
This guy was a surgical genius. He developed over 200 surgical instruments, scalpels, forceps, you name it, many of which are still used today.
Hold on.
Oh.
200 surgical instruments? That's mind-blowing. Were there any, specific instruments that really revolutionized surgery?
Oh, absolutely. He invented a tool that's still crucial in neurosurgery today, and his work on bone saws really paved the way for more precise orthopedic procedures.
Wow.
Just imagine the impact these inventions have had on countless lives over the centuries.
It's incredible. And I bet he didn't keep all that knowledge to himself, right?
Of course not. He wrote this massive medical encyclopedia called Kitab al-Tasrif, which became the definitive guide for surgery in Europe for centuries.
So European physicians were essentially using his book as a medical Bible.
Exactly. It was a vital channel for transmitting knowledge from Moorish scholars to European physicians, and it's a real testament to the power of, the written word and the dedication of those who translated and disseminated these texts.
It makes you wonder how different the history of medicine would have been without that cross-cultural exchange.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing surgical advancements weren't the only area where the Moors excelled, right? I mean, what about treatments and medicines?
Right. Well, that's where their mastery of pharmacology comes in. They were experts in herbal medicine, distillation, and compounding, creating, complex medicines from multiple ingredients. They meticulously documented and tested their plant-based treatments, which really laid the foundation for what we know as pharmacology today.
So they weren't just randomly mixing herbs together. They actually had a very systematic and scientific approach.
Absolutely. They understood the importance of precise measurements, carefully documented their findings, and even experimented with different combinations to find, the most effective remedies.
It sounds like they were running their own versions of clinical trials centuries ahead of their time.
Yeah.
What about pharmacies? Did they have anything like that?
They did. They established apothecaries, early versions of pharmacies,
Right.
where medicines were systematically prepared and distributed. And here's something truly groundbreaking. Thanks to their distillation techniques, they developed alcohol-based antiseptics.
Now, that's a game changer. Antiseptics, I mean, they must have been revolutionary for wound care and, preventing infections, especially in a time when those were, like, leading causes of death.
Exactly. They were light years ahead of Europe when it came to understanding the importance of sterilization and infection control.
Okay, so they have these advanced hospitals, cutting-edge surgical techniques, and pharmacies dispensing carefully prepared medicines.
Right.
But what about hygiene? I mean, we all know how important that is for, preventing disease.
Oh, that's where the Moors truly shine. Remember how I mentioned that medieval Europe wasn't exactly known for its cleanliness? Well, the Moors, they were obsessed with hygiene.
Really?
Oh, yeah. They built public baths, elaborate underground water channels, and even sewage systems, features unheard of in most of Europe at that time.
Wow, so they were proactively preventing diseases before they even started. That's like public health 101.
Exactly. They understood the link between cleanliness and health, and they made hygiene a central part of their culture and urban planning. They also promoted frequent washing, a stark contrast to Europe, where bathing was sometimes even considered harmful.
It's almost like they had a public health campaign going on centuries before the concept even existed. Were there any other ways they were ahead of the curve in terms of public health?
Well, consider this. They were among the first to understand the importance of quarantine for containing infectious diseases.
Wait, quarantine, didn't that come much later, like during the Black Death in Europe?
Yes, but the concept of isolating the sick to prevent the spread of disease was something the Moors had already been practicing. They were pioneers in recognizing the importance of isolating individuals to prevent the spread of contagious diseases.
It's incredible how so many of these practices that we consider like basic today have roots in Moorish medicine. It's like a hidden history of public health is being revealed right before our ears. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I need to know how this incredible knowledge made its way into Europe. What were the key channels of transmission?
Well, there were several pathways, all fascinating in their own right. First and foremost, there was the translation of Arabic medical texts into Latin, allowing European scholars to access this wealth of knowledge.
So these translations acted like bridges between like two worlds of knowledge.
Exactly. Works like Avicenna's Canon of Medicine and Al-Razi's Comprehensive Book of Medicine became essential reading in European medical schools, influencing, generations of physicians.
Those titles sound pretty comprehensive. What made these texts so groundbreaking?
Well, Avicenna's canon synthesized knowledge from Greek, Roman, and Indian sources alongside his own observations and insights, creating, this comprehensive encyclopedia of medical knowledge. Al-Razi, on the other hand, was a master of clinical observation. He documented patients' symptoms, tracked their progress, and even conducted experiments to test treatments.
It's amazing to think that these Moorish physicians were practicing evidence-based medicine centuries ago.
They were true pioneers, and their work paved the way for the development of scientific medicine as we know it today.
Wow. These texts were like seeds of knowledge planted in European soil and eventually blossoming into new discoveries and advancements. But wasn't there more to this exchange than just books? Didn't European scholars actually travel to Moorish Spain to learn?
They did. Cities like Toledo became major centers of learning, drawing scholars from all over Europe. They came to study at the renowned medical schools and libraries, immersing themselves in the latest medical advancement.
It must have been like an academic pilgrimage, a chance to learn from the best of the best. Did these scholars just passively absorb information, or was there like a real exchange of ideas?
It was a dynamic exchange. They engaged in lively debates with Moorish scholars, challenged medical theories, and even participated in clinical practice, gaining firsthand experience.
Wow, so it was a truly collaborative learning environment, fostering like a cross-cultural exchange of ideas and techniques.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just limited to Spain. The city of Salerno in Italy also became a major hub for medical learning, heavily influenced by Moorish knowledge and teaching methods.
So the impact of Moorish medicine reached far beyond the borders of Spain, shaping medical practices across Europe. But I can't help but wonder, was there any unexpected exchange of knowledge during the Crusades, even amidst all the conflict?
You're thinking along the right lines. While the Crusades were primarily military campaigns driven by, religious and political motives, they also created these unexpected opportunities for cultural exchange, including the exchange of medical knowledge.
So even in the midst of war, there were these moments of connection and learning. It's amazing how the human desire for knowledge and healing can transcend even the most bitter divides.
It's a powerful reminder that history is never simple. Even during times of conflict, there can be these moments of collaboration and shared learning.
I can only imagine the stories those returning crusaders must have told tales of these skilled Muslim physicians, different medical approaches, and perhaps even, experiences of receiving treatment themselves.
Yeah, and those stories likely sparked curiosity and a desire to learn more, further fueling the transmission of medical knowledge from the Islamic world to Europe. It's a fascinating example of how knowledge can find a way to spread, even in the most unexpected circumstances.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground here, from those groundbreaking medical texts and scholars traveling to Moorish Spain for knowledge, to the unexpected sharing that happened during the Crusades. It's clear that the influence of Moorish medicine on Europe was profound and far-reaching.
It truly was a transformative period in medical history, and we haven't even touched upon the tangible ways this knowledge impacted medical practices in Europe and changed lives.
Okay, now you've really piqued my curiosity. How did all this incredible knowledge translate into real-world changes in European medicine? What were some of the most significant shifts that occurred as a result of this Moorish influence?
Well, we'll delve into that fascinating part of the story in our next episode. Stay tuned. Welcome back to our deep dive into Moorish medicine. Before the break, we were talking about all the ways knowledge flowed into Europe from, translated texts to firsthand accounts during the Crusades.
Yeah, it really is amazing to think how these ideas cross borders and languages and shape the course of medical history.
Yeah.
But how did all of this actually translate into changes, like real changes in the way that medicine was practiced?
Yeah, that's the key question, right? I mean, knowledge is one thing, but putting it into practice and seeing those tangible results,
Right.
well, that's something else entirely. And the Moors' influence is really evident in a few key areas. One of the biggest ones was the standardization of medical education.
Okay, so let's talk about that. I mean, we know that they had these incredible medical schools in Spain,
Yeah.
but how did those methods influence the way that doctors were trained in the rest of Europe?
Well, before the Moorish influence, medical education in Europe was pretty unstructured. There weren't really any formal schools or standardized curricula or anything like that. It was more of an apprenticeship system, learn as you go kind of thing, with no clear guidelines.
So there's a bit of a free-for-all,
Yeah.
which, I mean, that probably led to like a lot of variation in the quality of care that people were getting.
Exactly. The Moors, on the other hand, they had this very systematic approach. They introduced organized curricula, rigorous training, and a strong emphasis on both theoretical knowledge and practical experience.
So they really brought order to the chaos. They essentially created a blueprint for what medical education should look like.
Precisely. And European scholars who studied in Moorish Spain, they saw this firsthand. They were exposed to this structured approach, and they started advocating for similar reforms when they went back home.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, seeing a system that clearly worked must have been a pretty powerful motivator for change.
Oh, it was. It was a domino effect. The Moorish model really inspired a wave of reforms across Europe, leading to, the establishment of these formal medical schools and these standardized curricula. And this was really crucial for elevating the overall quality of medical care across Europe.
It's just fascinating to think how such a fundamental aspect of modern medicine, standardized medical education, can be traced back to the Moors' influence. But their impact didn't stop there, right? I mean, what about their influence on surgery?
Yes. Their contributions to surgery were truly groundbreaking. Let's go back to our surgical superstar, Abulcasis, and his encyclopedia, Kitab al-Tasrif. This book, it became the go-to guide for surgery throughout Europe.
So European surgeons were essentially learning from the master himself, even centuries after he lived.
Precisely. His book was translated into Latin and widely disseminated, introducing a whole new set of surgical instruments and techniques to European physicians.
So what were some of the specific techniques that really kind of revolutionized surgery in Europe?
Well, cauterization, for example, became standard practice thanks to his work. It's a technique for using heat to seal blood vessels and stop bleeding. He also popularized the use of ligatures, basically threads to tie off blood vessels, which significantly reduced blood loss during surgery.
Those sound like some pretty big advancements.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine surgery without those techniques today.
Exactly. These innovations led to a a pretty dramatic decrease in complications and really improved surgical outcomes. It's no exaggeration to say that countless lives were saved and suffering alleviated, thanks to these techniques.
It really highlights how the Moors' focus on practicality and innovation,
Mhm.
it really translated into those tangible benefits for patients.
Absolutely. And their influence went beyond just, specific techniques. It was about, a mindset, a way of approaching medicine that emphasized observation, experimentation, and drawing conclusions based on evidence, not just tradition or superstition.
So they were really challenging the status quo, pushing back against centuries of medical dogma and
Right.
basically saying, hey, let's test things out and see what actually works.
Precisely. They were constantly testing their theories, documenting their findings, and refining their practices based on those real-world results, They really embodied the spirit of scientific inquiry that's so, so crucial to medical progress.
And that spirit of inquiry is what ultimately led to, the scientific revolution, which transformed Europe and laid the foundation for modern medicine. It's incredible to think that we owe so much of that to the Moors.
It's a really powerful reminder that progress often comes from those unexpected sources
Yeah.
and that embracing knowledge from those diverse cultures, well, it can lead to just incredible advancements.
Yeah.
But I think it's also important to remember that behind all these grand ideas and breakthroughs, well, there were real people whose lives were touched by those advancements.
That's a great point. It's easy to get lost in the big picture and forget that, history is ultimately about people and their lived experiences.
Yeah.
Do you have any specific stories that showcase the human impact of Moorish medicine on European society?
Well, there's this fascinating story about King Louis the Next of France. He fell seriously ill during the Crusades, and none of his European physicians could figure out how to cure him. So in desperation, they called upon a Muslim physician.
A Muslim physician treating a Christian king during the Crusades.
Yeah.
That's quite a turn of events.
It was, and it really speaks volumes about the reputation that Muslim physicians had, even among their adversaries. And guess what? The physician, he successfully treated the king. He restored him to health.
Wow. That's an amazing story. Talk about bridging cultural divides. It really shows that even in the midst of, of all that conflict, the desire for healing, it could overcome prejudice and those political barriers.
Exactly. It's a real testament to the power of medicine to transcend differences.
Mhm.
And it wasn't just kings and nobles who benefited from Moorish medical knowledge. The Moorish hospitals, with their focus on providing care for everyone, regardless of social status, they were a stark contrast to the limited healthcare options that were available to the poor in Europe at the time.
Yeah, their hospitals really were ahead of their time.
Yeah.
They really embodied a more inclusive vision of healthcare.
Absolutely. And they set an example that would later influence the development of public hospitals in Europe.
Those stories really, really bring this history to life.
Yeah.
They demonstrate that Moorish medicine wasn't just this, collection of theories and techniques, but it actually had this tangible impact on people's lives.
They do. And they also highlight, a crucial aspect of the Moorish approach to medicine, the emphasis on that holistic view of health and well-being.
Okay, so let's delve into that a little more. What did a holistic approach to medicine look like in Moorish society? How did it differ from the prevailing European views at the time?
Well, the Moorish approach was really rooted in this idea that the mind and body are interconnected.
That's good.
And that, true health involves addressing the well-being of the whole person, not just treating the physical symptoms of disease. They placed a lot of emphasis on things like, diet and exercise, mental and emotional well-being, and even the environment as factors that contributed to overall health.
So it was a much more balanced and integrated approach, recognizing that connection between mind, body, and environment.
Exactly. And this is really evident in their medical practices. They didn't just rely on medicines or surgery. They also used a wide range of therapies, including things like hydrotherapy, massage, aromatherapy, and even music therapy to promote healing and well-being.
It sounds like they were really ahead of their time in recognizing, the mind-body connection and incorporating those complementary therapies into mainstream healthcare.
Oh, they absolutely were. And this holistic approach, it really stood in stark contrast to the prevailing medical views in Europe at the time, which were, much more focused on treating disease as this purely physical phenomenon.
So it's really amazing to think how how much we can still learn
Hmm.
from the Moors' approach to healthcare, centuries later. I mean, today there's this growing movement toward integrated medicine, which really embraces that mind-body spirit connection.
Yeah.
And it seems like the Moors were really onto something all those years ago.
They definitely were, and their legacy continues to inspire us to think more holistically about health and to seek out those treatments that address the whole person.
Well, it's been an incredible journey exploring the impact of Moorish medicine on European history. We've uncovered so many fascinating details, from their groundbreaking surgical techniques to their emphasis on public health, to their holistic approach to healthcare. But I think it's important to acknowledge that we've only just scratched the surface here.
Yeah, that's right.
There's so much more to learn about this rich and complex history. So what are some resources that our listeners can explore if they want to, to delve deeper into this topic?
Oh, there are some fantastic books and articles out there. For starters, I'd recommend checking out The Medical History of Islamic Spain by Dr. Rachel Scott. It's a really comprehensive overview of the subject. And there's also a great article called The Influence of Islamic Medicine on Medieval Europe by Dr. Peter Poorman, which delves into those specific ways that Moorish knowledge shaped European medical practices.
Awesome. We'll be sure to include links to those resources in our show notes.
Right.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Moorish medicine, what's one key takeaway that you hope our listeners will remember from this episode?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that the history of medicine is a global history. It's a story of cross-cultural exchange, collaboration, and the sharing of knowledge. And then the Moorish influence on Europe is a perfect example of this. It shows us that progress often comes from those unexpected places, and that we can achieve so much more when we're open to learning from other cultures and traditions.
It's a powerful reminder that that our world is interconnected and that we all benefit from the sharing of knowledge and ideas. So until next time, keep those minds curious, keep exploring, and never stop learning.
And remember, there's a whole world of knowledge out there just waiting to be discovered.
Welcome back to the deep dive.
Yeah.
It's been incredible, exploring the impact of Moorish medicine on European history.
Yeah, we've uncovered so many fascinating details.
Yeah.
From groundbreaking surgical techniques to their emphasis on public health. But before we wrap up, I'd like to touch on something we mentioned earlier, the idea of a forgotten legacy.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we've been totally amazed by the Moors' innovations in hospitals and surgery and pharmacology and even public health.
Yeah.
But if their influence was so huge, why do so many people know so little about it? Why is this whole chapter of medical history often overlooked?
Well, that's a question that historians have been, grappling with for years. And there are a number of factors at play. One is the tendency to view history through kind of a Eurocentric lens, focusing primarily on the achievements of European civilizations while downplaying or even ignoring the contributions of other cultures.
So it's really a matter of perspective, like who's telling the story and whose voices are actually being amplified.
Exactly. It's like looking at a tapestry with only half the threads woven in.
And those missing threads represent a whole civilization's worth of knowledge and innovation.
Precisely. Another factor is the complex relationship between Europe and the Islamic world, which was marked by these periods of conflict and religious tension.
Oh, yeah.
And these tensions have undoubtedly influenced historical narratives, leading to this kind of selective focus on certain events while minimizing or forgetting others.
Yeah, it makes sense that that those historical tensions would shape how certain stories are told, or even if they're told at all.
Right.
But weren't there also practical barriers to the spread of this knowledge?
Absolutely. A significant obstacle was the language barrier.
Okay.
Much of Moorish knowledge was recorded in Arabic, which limited its accessibility to European scholars for centuries. It makes you wonder how much valuable information was lost or delayed in reaching Europe simply because of the need for translation.
It's amazing to think how language can be both like a bridge and a barrier to
Yeah.
understanding.
It really is, but thankfully, as we talked about earlier, dedicated scholars, they took on the immense task of translating those Arabic texts into Latin, and their efforts, they ensured that this knowledge was preserved and eventually made its way into European medical schools and
Yeah,
libraries.
those translators were true unsung heroes. I mean,
Mm.
their work played such a crucial role in shaping the course of medical history.
Yeah.
But thankfully, in recent decades, there's been this growing movement to re-examine history from a more inclusive perspective.
You're absolutely right. There's an increasing recognition of the need to, acknowledge the contributions of all cultures to human progress, including, the Moorish influence on medicine.
That's encouraging. It seems like we're finally starting to give the Moors, their due credit. And episodes like this one, they play a part in bringing their story to a wider audience.
Absolutely. By shining a light on this often overlooked chapter, where we're not just, setting the record straight, we're also gaining this much richer and more complete understanding of how medicine evolved.
It's like we're adding those missing threads to the tapestry,
Yeah.
revealing a more vibrant and intricate picture of the past.
Right.
But understanding the past it isn't just about satisfying our curiosity.
Right.
It's also about, learning those valuable lessons for the present and the future. So how can understanding Moorish medicine help us, navigate the challenges and the opportunities of modern healthcare?
Well, one key takeaway is the power of cultural exchange and collaboration.
Right.
The Moors were open to integrating knowledge and practices from diverse cultures, which ultimately fueled their innovations.
It was like a true melting pot of ideas,
Yeah.
blending the best of all these different medical traditions.
Exactly. And that's a lesson that's more relevant than ever in today's, globalized world. I mean, imagine the medical breakthroughs that we could achieve if we break down barriers and share knowledge freely and really learn from each other's expertise.
It's an exciting prospect, isn't it? Collaboration and knowledge sharing, they have the potential to really transform healthcare as we know it.
I believe so. Another key takeaway is the importance of a holistic approach to medicine. As we discussed earlier, the Moors, they didn't just focus on treating diseases. They emphasized preventive care, hygiene, and the well-being of the a whole person.
So their approach was more balanced and integrated,
Yeah.
recognizing that interconnectedness
Yeah.
of mind, body, and environment.
Right, and that's a valuable lesson as we face the challenges of chronic diseases and a healthcare system that often prioritizes, treatment over prevention.
Right.
We could learn a lot from the Moors' focus on promoting health rather than just reacting to illness.
It's a reminder that, that true health is about more than just the absence of disease.
Yeah.
It's about, cultivating that state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being.
Absolutely. And finally, the Moorish legacy, it really underscores the importance of constantly questioning, innovating, and pushing those boundaries of medical knowledge.
Right.
They were pioneers in their time, always searching for new and better ways to understand and treat diseases. And that spirit of inquiry, well, that's what drives medical progress.
It's what inspires researchers to find those cures, develop new treatments, and ultimately improve the quality of human life.
Exactly. And as we stand on the brink of, amazing advancements in areas like gene editing and personalized medicine, it's just so crucial to embrace that spirit of exploration and never stop asking, what's next.
It's a reminder that the journey of discovery, it never truly ends.
It doesn't. There's always more to learn, more questions to ask, and more frontiers to explore in this vast and ever-evolving world of medicine.
Well, I think that's a perfect note to end on. We've journeyed back in time to uncover a forgotten legacy, explored the impact of Moorish medicine on Europe, and gleaned these valuable insights for the future of healthcare.
It's been an enlightening exploration. I hope it inspires you to continue delving deeper into history and to appreciate the interconnectedness of human knowledge and progress.
I know I'm definitely feeling inspired. So until next time, keep those minds curious, keep exploring, and never stop learning.
And remember, there's a whole world of knowledge out there just waiting to be discovered.